This is a series where I taste different oysters and rate them 1 to 10, and today I'm trying wild Wellfleet oysters from Chesapeake Bay, Massachusetts. These oysters came from the Real Oyster cult, and I have a subscription with them where I get 3 different varieties a month. Now right away what I noticed, they look a little bit different than the farm-raised oysters. They're not as uniform as the farm-raised ones are, and chucking from the hinge definitely proved a little bit more difficult than the others. Now these were again about a 3-inch oyster, which is a perfect size. Once I was able to get the knife in there and get that hinge popped, it became super easy. I was able just to cut the muscle at the very front, and it produced a really nice, clean looking oyster. I loosened up the meat for the shell, and looking over the oyster, I think this is actually going to be really good, like a lot of people are saying in the comments. So super excited to give it a try. And let me tell you, this was absolutely a very solid oyster. People are always asking me what kind of oyster should I try if I've never tried oysters before. This wild Wellfleet is it. It's an 8.4. It's got good salt, a good sweetness, and some complex flavors. Highly recommend. Yep. This is a series where I slurp down 48 oysters in one sitting. Just joking, no. This is a series where I try different oysters from around the nation. Today I'm trying Summerstone from Hama Hama Farms out there in Washington State. I always like these kind of shells that the Washington State farms have. They're like that scallopy edge. They're a nice deep cup, around 2.5 inches, a little bit smaller than I would like, but still really good size oyster. Hama Hama ships them fresh overnight, so you know you're getting a really good product. And I can tell this is a nice fresh oyster because it's nice and tightly closed, and it took me a little bit to get it open. Now, after I got it open, there's a little thing in here, a little pro tip for you. I love when I see a big abductor muscle on the oyster. So if you see that muscle right in the center there, right there, that's the abductor muscle, and I think when you eat that as well, it adds a little bit of sweetness to it. I cleaned out all the grit, cut the little abductor muscle at the bottom there, and got it ready to eat. Now, of course, I always recommend chewing it because you get all the different flavors. I gotta say, this is a 9.0. Best oyster I've tried so far. I could definitely eat 48 of these. This is a series where I try oysters and rate them 1 to 10, and today's oyster is going to rate pretty high. Now, I got these oysters from the Real Oyster cult, and they're called the Rock Reserve. They're grown by Real Oyster cult right there in Duxbury Bay, Massachusetts. Now, right away, I could tell it was a good-looking oyster, 3 inches, nice and clean, and I was excited to open it up. Now, to remind you, I like an oyster that has some good umami, a nice sweet flavor, and a good salt to finish. None of those things too overpowering. I'm just looking for something that's really nice and well balanced. The oyster was super easy to shuck. I was able to get my knife into the hinge without any problem, no shell flaking or anything like that. And opening it up, it showed that it was a big, meaty oyster, especially for that 3-inch size. Now, one thing I noticed right away when I was looking at it is that adductor muscle right there is huge, which means it's going to have a good flavor to it as well. I gave it a taste, and by far, this is my favorite oyster I've tried so far. I'm going to give it a 9.8 out of 10. This one from the Real Oyster cult is definitely the real deal. This is a series where I try oysters and rate them 1 to 10 based on my personal preference. And today I'm trying Orchard Point oysters from the Chesapeake Bay. Now you can go online to their shuck shop and you can order them. I got the 50 count of the Orchard Point Classics and they were $67 plus shipping. They were a good size, right around that 2.5, 3 inches like I like. And I found them super easy to shuck, which is always nice, especially if you're just starting out trying oysters. Now opening this one up, the meat to shell ratio, so how full it was unreal. These are big, fat, plump oysters, especially for that size, and it's got the big adductor muscle, which to me means it's going to taste pretty good too. I like the adductor muscle because I think it brings like a sweetness and umami flavor to it that just takes the oyster to a different level. Now I'm getting this one ready to slurp down. When you do that, you want to make sure you cut the adductor muscle and kind of loosen the oyster up around the shell and get any kind of bits of shell out of there. It was time to taste this oyster, and right away I could taste that little bit of good brine, nice sweetness, and the umami. This is the first 10 out of 10 oyster this year. You guys got to give these ones a try. This is a series where I try different oysters and rate them 1 to 10. And today I'm trying Sailor's Valentine from the Real Oyster cult. Now, I haven't had these ones before, but I guess these are just mini versions of the Rock Reserve, which I have had before and I rated pretty high. So I'm curious to see how I rate these as well. Now, this is a 2.5 inch oyster. That's a really good size. Doesn't have too deep of a cup, and the shell looks really clean. When I went to shuck it, I found that it was pretty easy to shuck from the hinge. There wasn't a bunch of flaking or anything like that. With these smaller oysters though, I definitely recommend taking your time. You're not in a speed shucking competition. Take your time, open it up, make sure that when you're done shucking this oyster, it looks pretty. The visual appearance of food definitely matters. Now, this one looked really nice and plump. I love all the oyster liquor in there. Gave it a try, and right away, I could tell I was gonna like this one. It had good salt, good umami, a little bit of sweetness, And I'm going to rate this one a perfect 10 out of 10. This was absolutely one of my favorite oysters so far.